I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 28. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode, where you are sitting in on a conversation that I had with Emily Kerr-Finell. Emily and I have known each other since about 2009. She hired me as a coach. She was a startup founder, and she was she was applying to be a part of this new incubator that was happening in Boulder, Colorado. Her company did get accepted, and I was her coach through some of the really early times of getting that business off of the ground. Since then, we've definitely kept up this coaching relationship as needed, as she's needed support. She's a serial entrepreneur, and that has been lovely. But what I love the most about Emily is that we've become very close friends in the last 10, 11 years. So this listening in today is, I know she's not a lawyer that's running her own firm, but she is an entrepreneur. And her brain thinks like an entrepreneur, and she is very deliberate and thoughtful with her approach and has learned a lot of lessons along the way. She's had companies that she started where she took venture capital money, and she's had companies that she's bootstrapped. Her current company was bootstrapped and it's doing very well. So there's just a lot she has to offer. I love talking to her about business and entrepreneurship and all the things that come with that. And also, when I say all the things come with that, living a really rich life as well, not just giving it all to your business. So I think that you're going to really enjoy this conversation. For sure, there's some nuggets you can walk away with. So excited to bring her to you. Please enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Velocity Work Podcast. I am so very pleased and excited that my dear friend, Emily Kerr-Finell, is here to have a really great conversation today around entrepreneurship and beyond. Emily's company is called Wholesale in a Box. This is her current company, so we're going to get into some of that, of Wholesale in a Box. And she has done such an amazing job of building a community to really serve her customers. And I wanted to have her on because she is no stranger to entrepreneurship. And I think everybody listening to this podcast there's just inevitable pain points and struggles and wins that I know that she will be able to identify with you, and you will be able to identify with her around what it's like to have your own business. So Emily, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. For everyone listening, I'm going to give a few little things, nuggets about how I know Emily. And then Emily, if I would love for you to share a bit about your background too. I know Emily from 2008 or 2009. And we originally started by having a coaching relationship together, but quickly realized just how much we liked one another. And we've been friends over the years ever since. And I've gotten to see Emily's journey as an entrepreneur that has taken different directions. And I feel really lucky to have been at times, it seems like, a bit on the inside of some of the lessons, the hard times, but also some of the things that are really exciting. And it's been a journey. So I also wanted to say to everyone listening, just out of the gates, Emily is for sure one of the most disciplined. Is that the right word I want to use? She does her homework. Like I've been in a coaching relationship with Emily off and on for the last 10 years. And she is one of the people that when she comes and she pays money to hire you as a coach, she puts in the work, and it's so obvious and so clear because she moves so quickly after that. And she always has her work done, and she always has this is what I learned. This is like, she knows how to break it down, and you could tell she's really done the work. And I think that's unique. So I'll probably ask her a couple of questions about that. And the last thing I'll say is that she is one of the most thoughtful people I know about how to live and how to work. I think all of us spend a lot of time thinking about what we want that to look like. And it may not always feel like that to you, Emily, so I'm open to that. But Emily lives a very intentional life, and it's truly inspiring. So like I said earlier, I'm really glad you're here because I think it'll be cool and fun to dive into certain questions that I don't feel like I can do with just anybody. So will you tell everybody a little bit about your background in like how you ended up with Wholesale in a Box and what Wholesale in a Box is?
Yeah, for sure. So Wholesale in a Box is a subscription software and training company. And we work with makers. So people like you might see selling on Etsy. We help makers get their products, their handmade products, into brick and mortar stores. And we do this through this subscription, and the subscription helps them find stores that would be a good fit, manage the outreach process, and be effective with the outreach process. And what I think is cool, the reason Wholesale in a Box is always a little tricky to describe is because it is a little bit of a hybrid, and it's not something we just like imagined or came up with. It came from really in-depth interviews and conversations and observations with the people we were trying to serve. And that was a process that happened so we started about 5.5 years ago. And today, Wholesale in a Box is this thriving small company. It's all remote. We have a team of 3 employees, a couple of contractors, and me. And we've served about 700 makers over the past few years. It's just the most fun work I've ever had.
So
and
cool.
Then in terms of, so I feel really lucky to get to do it, and always grateful when I look back at how I got here, for everything that brought me here.
Yeah.
I think, my background, and we can talk more about any piece that seems applicable or interesting, but my background is one of many changes and lots of jobs and lots of companies started, lots of successful things and lots of complete flops of varying sizes. So I've done, kind of like high-powered corporate management consulting. I have taught. I have worked in retail stores. I have worked at farmers markets and everything in between. I've probably started close to a dozen business projects. Some of them were of the 2-week variety, and some of them were venture capital. One of them was venture capital funded and really significant and had kind of a fast rise and quick fall. And then I think a lot of that informs how I structured Wholesale in a Box, which is bootstrapped, and has had this kind of very steady organic growth, and has been very responsive to the needs of the people that we serve. So a lot of what I've learned through all of those ups and downs over my background informed a lot of the choices we made with Wholesale in a Box when we started it, and today as we continue to shape it.
Yeah. Oh, so that was a really good summary of your background. I was curious how you were going to do that because you've done so many things.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
And I mean that as a compliment. Okay, well, so there's something specific that you said I want to go back to, and then I do have a question about your history that I think will be relevant. You mentioned that Wholesale in a Box has grown organically in that it came from a lot of customer development and a lot of really, really understanding what their needs were and pain points were and all of that. And you work harder at that than anyone I know. And I don't think that's because other people don't want to work hard at it. I think it's just not as easy as what it would seem. Like,
It's so hard.
It's a slog, right? Like I've seen you really be committed to that process of lean, like being lean,
Yeah.
the lean startup, for those of you that know about that book, but basically just trying to create the minimum viable product before you just go out of the gates and create something that's really expensive and might not be what fits the customer.
Yeah.
And so you have been very committed to the lean process and making sure that you've tested things before you really fully develop them. So can you say more about that period? And I think you always kind of are doing that with your
Yes.
clients. So that's probably important to note, but especially when you were really shifting into that mode and getting things off of the ground, what did that look like? Did it look like conversations? Did it look like surveys? Like, how do you actually do it? Because it sounds like a great idea, but how do you do it?
Well, I think the hardest part about that process is you have to be willing to put everything at risk when you do it. So if you're using customer development to confirm what you already want to do or to get detail on what you already want to do, it's not really the process. So when we've done this process, whether it was at the beginning or I just did a huge round of it because we want to change some things in our company, every time I have to emotionally accept the outcome of this could mean we don't proceed with the business. It could mean we fire everybody and do something different. It could mean shifting the business model completely. And it's only, I think, when you really embrace that you're able to proceed through the process effectively. So it's very
I'm so
challenging.
sorry. I have a question about what you just said.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, the risking everything. So you could shut it down based on what you learn.
Yep.
I imagine that there's quite a few people out there that if they aren't committed to that process, like if they really aren't serious about just this needs to fit my customer wholly, or I'm not going to do it, then I would imagine there's a lot of people that, because of how scary that seems, like, what? No way, I'm not shutting this down. I've been working my butt off for this for so long. It seems like,
can I interrupt you? You
keep
will
going.
get that. You will suffer if you ignore
okay, this is good.
what
this
your customers truly want and the problem they truly have. You will suffer the consequences of that slowly taking a Band-Aid off over the span of years, and severely, and drain money and energy out of yourself excruciatingly. Or you can get that insight quickly and directly by really listening and really being open to what they say. So you don't get to shelter yourself from it. You just get to either have it directly or you get to suffer from it slowly.
So it's almost like if you aren't committed to the level that you were just talking about, you're just kind of pretending that everything.
Yeah. It's kind of like not looking at your credit card transactions, which actually probably a lot of people also don't do. But right. It's kind of like it's still coming out of your card. You're just not aware of it.
Yeah, totally. And then by the time that it's a problem, it's such a problem.
Yes. There's nothing to be done about it. And that's what happened with my first significant company with Liga Massiva.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way you view that.
That's how I view it. Oh, I think there were a lot of other factors. There are always a lot of factors when a company needs to close. There's a dozen factors. Totally. But I think the one that I had control over and that I could have changed was that we probably don't want to go too far down that road because it's very detailed, but we were serving two groups of people. And one group of people were really passionate about really listening to and being responsive to. That was the farmers in that case. Mm-hmm. And the people we were selling to, we were just kind of like, oh, we think we get it. And we weren't really delving into what problem do these people know they have that we are solving, and how can we solve it perfectly? And we just didn't really have a good understanding of that. And by the time I realized that, it was too late.
Wow. Did you realize it before? Do you think, did you think about that before?
At the very end.
Wow.
And actually at the very end, in the final months of closing it, one of my teammates said, you should read the Lean Startup. And I didn't know what that was. And I read it and I realized at that point what was going on. It sounds almost too story like, but that is true. And at that point I was like, if I'm ever going to do another company, I'm going to do it this way. And that actually led to several companies, and some of them they didn't take off. As a result of that process, we said, oh, there's nothing here. Let's move on to the next idea. But then this was one where there was something here and we were able to grow it. And then we periodically return to that process, just as we have over the last couple months. What does it look like? Mm-hmm. It could include a survey, but the most fundamental unit is real conversations with the people you're serving. And there are a lot of interesting technical skills to it. The Lean Startup is probably the best resource for those skills of how do you structure those conversations and how do you structure hypotheses. And there's a lot to it to do it well. Steve Blank and his customer development process is super useful. I think you were probably referring to that. And I think that's maybe the other piece. A lot of people are scared to really delve into it. And then other people maybe aren't willing to take quite enough time to really take on, all right, this is a new skill for me. How do I get really good at it?
Yeah. Okay. So that's great. So do you go back to that book and refresh yourself when it's time to like you said, you just did another round
it's on my nightstand right now.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That is amazing. Steve Blank, by the way, I just listened to him on a podcast that is, oh, wow. I'm blanking on the name of the podcast right now. It's somebody out of Silicon Valley that has basically started a podcast and has built what he's built basically, from Steve Blank's work, and is friends with Steve Blank. And so Steve Blank was on the podcast, and it was I'm in the middle of it. It's a good interview. And I also saw that on Tim Ferriss' podcast, Steve Blank is on one of the most recent ones.
Oh, cool. Oh, yeah. That sounds interesting.
I think his name is Mike Maples, but Mike Maples Jr. I can verify this. I'll put it in the show notes for everybody that's listening.
Perfect. Yeah.
But Steve Blank is on that podcast, and there's other podcast episodes that are about his work. So it's pretty. I've just been
a good resource. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you just mentioned him, because he's sort of, from what I understand, Eric Ries wrote the Lean Startup, but Steve Blank was really behind him as a mentor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. Okay. So I wanted to ask, that's great to know. So and I'm thinking of lawyers, they have their own firms. They know that there's a need for their services, and they choose their practice, what area of practice they want to go into, right, when they're starting their own firm. But what is interesting is I think things are changing so fast in the world. I noticed that some attorneys are doing a better job maybe than traditionally in terms of how they deliver the services and how they, like, what customers prefer, trying to stay up with the times, I guess, where it doesn't have to be, there's sort of an old and stodgy way of doing things, which some attorneys probably prefer that, but there's definitely attorneys out there that that they're curious about what is a better way to serve clients. So I don't know. I'm just thinking for attorneys listening to this, like, you're not excluded from thinking about customer development.
Yeah, I don't think so. And, I think one of the things is when you have a very specific competency, either as a company or as a person. So as a lawyer, you've built up this asset of your knowledge, skills, and focus area. And so this customer development, it's kind of like that's one circle of the Venn diagram, is that those competencies and that skill set of your focus within law. And then you're trying to find the intersection with the other circle of the Venn diagram, which is what problems people know they have. And so it's not one or the other. It's not just like, well, I do, this type of law. So if that's what you want, then come and get it. And it's not simply, well, what do people need? And I'll shift myself to fit anything, but finding that intersection, I think that you get really powerful results.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the benefit is, I could just spend the whole episode talking about this because I'm so passionate about it, but the benefit of doing it, like I talk about the scary part, but the benefit of doing it is when you get this right, you feel like you go from pushing a boulder up a hill to just like releasing a cart down the steepest hill. Because everything, you are creating something, you don't have to sell people on anything. You are literally creating what people deeply want to interact with and purchase. And all the marketing copy comes from it. All of the product decisions come from it. Everything, once you get through this one tricky part, everything else becomes so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I wanted to ask you about, just because you're one of the only people that I've had on this podcast that's ever accepted funding.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that depending on the listener, like there's some people that have a really big vision for what they want to build, and it includes, multiple locations. And I'm not saying that they're for sure thinking about funding, and it's different than funding for the kind of company that you got funding for.
Mm-hmm.
But what would you say were some of the biggest lessons about taking funding? Or maybe not lessons.
I think I learned a few really concrete things. One is there is no money without energetic entanglement. I don't know if this sounds too woo-woo for your audience.
No. Yeah.
The other way to think of it is, so basically like the source that you get the money from, the intention, the character, the ideals that with which they gave you the money or from which that money comes will affect you. So choose wisely.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second thing is that you will only get money for your business when money is truly the missing piece. If there are other missing pieces, like you can't do sales, or you aren't a good leader, or you don't have a good team, you won't usually be able to get money for your business. And you should usually only get any money, whether it's debt or venture funding, if it's the only way to proceed. Like, try to solve the problem in every other way, because every entrepreneur wants freedom and autonomy and control. That's part of why we do what we do. And taking money from someone else does limit that a little bit. And so it's only worth it if you really need to do it and there's no other way to get through to where you're trying to go.
Okay. That's super interesting. I was going to ask you if you would ever take it again in the future if you started something different, but I guess it depends on
I would if all three of those things matched, but I find that third requirement to be a very high bar.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple questions about something I've been talking a lot to clients, with clients about, and also that we've talked about on the podcast, is this idea that around mission and vision statements.
Yeah.
And I think, I've gotten some mentorship recently that not necessarily on like a vision statement or a mission statement, but you have to have a vision for the way that this woman put it, who's an very experienced, very successful entrepreneur, said, you have to know your company's nirvana. Like what is the one you want to create? And because I was asking a lot about, she said, you just reverse engineer from that. And I said, you make that sound super simple. And I help clients reverse engineer all the time. Like, where do you tell me about the times where you got stuck or you were wrong, or, you were experiencing barriers or you had to pivot? And she said, oh, you just don't know your vision hard enough if that's the case. She was like, you don't understand what I'm saying. She was like, you have to understand what nirvana looks like for your customer. Like, what is that? And I thought, and I'm sure you learn more about that as you go, and it probably can shift as you grow. I wish I could have talked to her about it for much longer than what we had. But since then, I've really been reflecting on the importance of a mission statement versus a vision statement, or a mission versus a vision. and I've always been, it seems like the most popular way of thinking about the difference between the two is that the vision is sort of the future version and the mission is like more operational and how you execute on those things or how you provide what you provide. And so when I'm working with clients, I haven't landed yet on what I think is the most important, like you've got to nail this down. So I've been really researching and reflecting and reading. So I'm curious your opinion about what's important based on your experience with maybe not statements, but just, or maybe statements, but yeah, you can just go, you can riff.
It's so interesting that you ask about that. It's been really alive for me too. And I haven't settled on an answer to it either. I find it an interesting counterbalance to all the customer development stuff because that's just very responsive to what your customer needs and being very like willing to evolve and morph. And then the vision and the mission is kind of like the bedrock of like, it's kind of the flip side of it. What are we trying to do? What do we want? So with Wholesale in a Box, we had a mission. We knew what the goal was, which was to help people do the work they love sustainably. And that fits in with, I think, something that I'm really called to do as a person. You know, when I look at the common thread among all the work that I do, I think that keeps popping up. So that makes sense to me as a mission, and that could look a variety of ways. But we really hadn't done like values or visioning within the company much at all until a week ago. And with my team, I did a visioning workshop and we did a values workshop. And it was a really interesting experience and I think will be helpful. We also realized that visioning, kind of creating a word picture of what your ideal outcome is, can be very helpful even on a project level. So describing, like, you know, if we're making this change to the product, what's the ideal version of this, and what's kind of the nirvana of this product change or something like that. So I don't know the answer either of terms of what's necessary. I think it is one place though where entrepreneurs can ask themselves, what's my tendency, and try to balance that out a little bit. Some people's tendency is to be very now focused and never think about their vision or their mission or their values. And so they probably need the advice to do more of that. And other people are all about the whiteboard and the reflecting, and they could do well to forget that for a while and just be more responsive to what their customer is telling them. So I think it's a balance.
That's a really good point, because people do have tendencies. That's so true. Like mine is more, well, actually, maybe I don't know what mine is.
You have a good balance, and I think that's part of why you're successful.
Well, thank you. I mean, I try to be, it's interesting when I think about balance, it's like I've taken steps back to be able to think about the bigger vision. But then most of the time it's just boots on the ground and trying to be responsive and all that. But so I can see where that's not easy though, to take the space you need. Like you decided to just do that recently.
Yeah.
Your company's 5.5 years old. And it's
right.
like, for whatever, I didn't know that you did that last week, but for whatever reason, it just felt like, okay, we need to, like, this feels like a smart idea to think about the vision. Did you come up with anything or like keywords or phrases that you're willing to share that felt like it fit the vision for Wholesale in a Box?
I mean, the cool thing was that it was very driven by my team. And so I just did a lot of listening.
Wow.
Which is less obviously my impulse, because I love to vision and build and imagine. And it was such a extraordinary moment to hear my team talk about what it means to work at Wholesale in a Box and what they think our values are. So not so much what they should be, but what are they? And not what should our vision be, but what is it? It's a little bit different, and it was really powerful to hear it come from them. I think, as we started, we made the road by walking it. And then now it's almost looking back and saying, like, what is this road we're walking on? And getting that crystallized just enough so that we can really lean into it moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You mentioned that that's you're a visionary, like that's your tendency. And I would say 100% you are one of the greatest visionaries that I know, that I'm close to.
Oh my gosh.
Because I mean, you're so good at thinking, like even when we're talking about my business or my work and you want to know what's going on. And so I'll fill you in. The questions you ask always look out, unless it's around customer development, which you're really good at, like, calling in, right? And so that is something that I have always admired in you, because it's not my innate gift, is to really have this creative, like you told me one time that when you were little, your parents would offer you, do you want peas or carrots? And you would pick, you would not choose either that they gave you. You would come up with your own option or something like that.
That's
true. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Like you've always thought outside the box. You've always thought of the third option that doesn't exist in front of you.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that I've always picked carrots or peas. I don't know, but it is like something that is innate. Like it's just a piece of who you are. It was born in you to really consider the thing that you can't see in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think that is, when I work with certain clients, I can pick up on it if that's how they operate too. And it is, I have like a reverence for it, because it feels unique. And I think that it's important to have someone in your world to be able to help you do that if it's not your strength. So anyway, when you mentioned,
I think that it does resonate with me, but I think, it can be, you taught me this concept of like a skill. I think I've probably messed it up a little bit in my head, but like the balcony in the basement thing, so that every character trait you have, there's a kind of a good version of it and a not so good version of it. Like basically the way I think of it is every strength you have is also a weakness in some ways. And part of my journey in entrepreneurship has been understanding that, and understanding where are my strengths, extreme strengths, and where are they weaknesses, and not so much balancing it, but building with an understanding of that. And so I do think I'm future oriented. And I do think I pick option C when there are two options. And that is an incredible strength. It does have weak points though. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have these same weak points, which are like to manage a team well, you have to counteract that a little bit. I think to do customer development well, you have to counteract it. So there are a lot of things you need to fill in the gaps with, I think, if that is one of your strengths.
Yeah. Okay. So this feels like a fitting time to ask. I remember 2 or 3 years ago, there was a space in building Wholesale in a Box where it was getting some traction and it was doing okay, but because of that visionary side of you, and that's what excites you, there was this discipline you were practicing to stay in the business and manage and grow the business instead of just going out to start something new.
Oh my gosh, this is a great example. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, we haven't really talked about that since that came up, but I remember you thinking like, well, I guess it just doesn't feel exciting to stay in this. Like, I could build it, I could grow it, I can manage this, but I really want to, like, my brain wants to go think big and think like you were craving that.
Oh my God. Yes.
So anyway, say more about that and like how you overcame it or whatever.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that's been one of the most transformative things in my business in the last 5 years is that shift that you helped me make. So number one was this insight that I think we came up with together, which is can you ask the question, how do you I have a quick start energy, right? I like to start things. And how can I use that quick start energy to evolve and grow within the business rather than just jumping from product idea to product idea or business idea to business idea? So that's one thing. I have found a way to channel that impulse and momentum within the business. Maybe more importantly, though, you got me onto this thing of committing to a plan for a period of time. We talked about quarters, and come hell or high water, sticking with that plan. And at the end of that quarter or that month, whatever you want it to be, you can reassess and you will have time to reassess. But following through with that, regardless of whether you have a better idea all of a sudden, or there's something you're more excited to work on. And I do think that I would say if there's one thing that entrepreneurs need, it is that. Like over and over again, I think that is a missing piece for people who run their own business.
Wow. Because they get distracted with the next idea or the next thing.
I think there are like 5 different reasons that people jump. One is that an idea always seems better before you start on it. Like it's not till you get 30% of the way into it that you realize how hard it's going to be to open a new bank account, for instance, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it's very tempting to jump, and then you just jump to something that seems exciting. But then when you get 30% of the way into that, that's going to seem like a pain in the butt too.
Yeah.
So that's one reason. And this quick start thing. So you get bored with executing the thing. I think resistance and fear comes up as you get partway into your plan. So that's pushing you to jump out of it. But just sticking and that development of that discipline of sticking with the plan that you made for as long as you intended to finish it. Oh my gosh, that will change your life. I really think.
I don't disagree. And I feel like there's always room for improvement.
Oh, I know, me too. I'm like writing down that I need to think about how I could do that better right now.
Yeah. I was just talking to a client yesterday. They were in for their quarterly retreat and super idea oriented, like quick start oriented. And we had a talk about like this doesn't get pushed to the side. Like these things that you said you're going to do, even if like do those first. If you have bandwidth for other things, that's great. But like, don't push these to the side. And so we were talking about, and I could feel her like, her eyes were a little darty and she was like, yeah. And I was like, no, but seriously. And so we started talking about how there really isn't, even this sounds like the opposite of how I want my life to be, but it helps me somehow. There really isn't room for emotion in the execution phase of whatever you've planned. As long as you've been really thoughtful about the plan, you're definitely going to wake up some days and not feel like doing the things you're supposed to be doing because something else sounds better or because you're tired or because whatever. But there isn't room for the in the moment feeling doesn't get to trump your plan. And it's similar, I think, when people commit to waking up early every morning to go for a run. Right. Like the hardest part is just getting out the door. But sometimes people just want to stay under the covers and stay in bed because they don't feel like getting up. But what result do you really want? Like if you don't follow through on your plan, you're not ever going to see the results that you have set for yourself. It sounds so simple.
It sounds so simple. It's so hard. And it's so transformative. I cannot. I think if everybody did that, they would just be shocked and amazed at the transformation they would see in their business in 6 months.
Yeah. I do think too, not to toot Velocity Works horn, but I'm just thinking about the clients that have signed up to work with us. I feel like that's part of this.
It's part of what you do, right?
Be successful is because they know they're coming back at the quarter to revisit this, and they know the deal. Like this stuff has to be done, and we'll evaluate at that point. Like, how did it go? Do we want to do that again? What did we learn? Like, let's process the lessons. But you don't get to in the middle of a quarter or 6 weeks in, or whatever, just shortly in, you don't get to look around like, is this working? I don't know if this is working. Like, I think this idea over here is probably going to be more effective. Get the luxury to do that. And
No.
I feel like when you have an accountability, there's some accountability there where you have to follow through quarter to quarter. It helps.
I think part of what velocity work does is it's not just accountability. It's not like you're not babysitting people. That's not the point. The point is that you are sticking with them long enough that they can learn to restructure their neural pathways. I don't know if that resonates with anybody, but we have so many habits around skipping around and not having this kind of discipline unless we have a boss that's forcing us to do it or some other external thing. We have so many habits against this that you are helping people rebuild the new habit. And then they'll have it. You know, they don't need to work with you for 2 decades necessarily. They'll have it and they can run.
Yes. Yes, definitely. 100%. I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. Okay, well, this kind of leads me to, and you hit on this earlier, this is something else we've been talking a lot about is this has been part of my reflection process because the vision is so important. There's a lot of weight placed on that in a lot of different arenas, at least that you hear talked about. And I was struggling because even the vision that I'm pretty close to having like a really concise vision statement, so to speak, for velocity work. But it's still not the thing that every morning is going to like drive me to get out of bed and I love my clients and I love the work I do, but I don't live for my clients. I don't know if that makes any sense. And that probably sounds really cold at first, but hear me out. There's something else, like whether it could be quote unquote selfish. There's like, I have, independent of that, I have a really deep desire to make this business successful so that many people can benefit from it, like my clients. But you could go get a job somewhere and maybe have a similar impact. You could go work for someone else. So why keep waking up to do the hard things that are required to build the business, to build the company? And I think about this for my clients. It's almost like people talk about you need a compelling reason of your own. Like what is your compelling reason for continuing to get up and show up and do the hard things? Because while the company vision may be a really big magnet for what you do and how you decide to do things, it doesn't always mean you're going to be enthusiastic, and it's not the internal flame that's like driving you. Like I don't know if you would say that you were born to help makers live sustainably. It is just something that's beautiful that you get to create.
Right.
So something, for instance, my compelling reason is definitely shifting right now because my family is growing. That it's more around just providing opportunity for my son. That hasn't been there before. And at other times in my life, the compelling reason was to leave the consulting firm that I worked for because I wanted control of my own life. I wanted, like, that was a really strong reason to build this company while I was still there. Right. So I think there's different drivers that we have in different fields of our life. And I'm wondering about if there's anything that comes to mind that's like, well, this is why I do it. I mean, because you mentioned earlier, entrepreneurs tend to want freedom, autonomy, and control. And so maybe it just comes back to that for most entrepreneurs. But do you have a hunch of like, why not just go get a job? A job that'd be fulfilling, like a good job. Why not just do that?
Well, first of all, I think it's such a good question. And I think it's a great insight that it's not always like the high and mighty or the lofty sounding mission that is actually the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. I don't think people talk enough about that. It's almost like people are embarrassed to admit to that. And I think that the more lofty sounding thing is crucial. I don't think it's necessary, but I do think it's not sufficient. There has to be this thing that you're trying to put your finger on that I have trouble putting my finger on too, which is kind of this more hour to hour when it's 5 a.m, literally, and your alarm is going off thing. Yeah, I don't know what that, I actually don't know how to put my finger on that for me. It's some combination of having, how, I think it's like Stephen Pink talks about the three components everybody needs in their satisfying job. I think it's autonomy, mastery, and relationships.
Mm.
I believe those are the three things. And if not, those are three dimensions that people could consider. And I think entrepreneurs are no different. So for me, autonomy and mastery are like two sides of the same coin. I just love having the freedom every day to be able to build towards something I think is truly great and like according to my definition. And nobody tells me when it's great enough or that's, that doesn't matter. You shouldn't do it like that. I get to decide, and I get to have the playful joy of experimenting hour to hour and every day to get there to that. Does that make any sense?
It does. Totally. And I actually am glad you said that. Like, I think people are afraid to admit that their reason it might not be altruistic enough, or I think that it's, I just don't, I think it's good to know like why you're doing what you're doing so that you can remind yourself of that and you can
optimize for it. Like, I know that I can't quite explain it, but I know that thing about getting to build this thing in the way I want to is the reason I do it. And so I'm relentless about controlling my schedule so that I have as much time as possible to do that part of it. That's not answering emails. That's not fixing Zapier when it breaks. Those don't satisfy me in that way. So if a big part of my week and day is not dedicated to this feeling of building in the way I want to, then I may as well just go get a job somewhere else.
That is interesting. Yeah. I love talking about this because it's so easy to burn out.
Yeah.
And I think if you can stay connected to why you do what you do.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's different. Every person is so different.
It's got to be different. Yeah.
So like, what is it for you? Why are you doing this? And making sure you understand that. And you're not just a workhorse that's working towards this vision that is great for the company. And I think rarely there are people that feel like they were born to fulfill that vision for the company.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's common.
Right.
So knowing that, now I've been having clients, and that's the beauty of it. This will probably shift somehow or evolve in the future.
Yeah.
But what it's evolved into now is giving them space to think through why are they going to keep working so hard for this?
Yeah.
Why are they going to keep, what's going to get them up at 5 a.m. when, why would they not just go back to sleep and kind of blow something off?
Yeah.
Having them know what that is, not only then I can better support them, but also then that can stay top of mind as a reminder when things are not a cakewalk, how to keep moving forward, I guess. So it feels small, but it feels like a piece that now, because I'm sort of pushing that conversation, I'm testing this out still for sure. But for myself, once I got clear about the compelling reason, it definitely does change things. There's something in the back of my mind now when I know I sit down and I see my calendar and I have things I've got to stay focused. There's no room for distraction. It's easy to stay focused and there's no room for distraction if I know why it's important to stay focused.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not just for the company, but there's a bigger reason why I'm doing this and I want to be successful with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just thought I would get your take on it. I felt like you'd be fun to chat with.
That's such an important question. Yeah. I can't wait to hear, I hope it's something you keep asking on your podcast because it's really helpful to hear how other people answer that. And then you can it helps you gain clarity on your own why.
Yeah. I had one client that said, why am I doing this? He said, I want to be able to take 2 vacations every year where they're extravagant. I want to be able to do that with my family. I want to take my kids places. And so basically he sort of nailed it down to like, I want to take 2 extravagant vacations a year. And at first he was like, I guess I need a better reason than that. And I was like, no, you don't. No, I don't think you do. I think as long as like, if that's a thing for you, then as long as the work that you're doing lines up with the vision for the company and the, it's like, it's a reason to stay hyper plugged in and hyper focused.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't need to be better than that. Like it's pretty great.
It also fits into like what's the right size and the right shape of your business. Depending on what people's why is, it might point to having more employees or 0 employees. It might point to having 200% growth every year, or it might point to having 2% growth every year. Right. And those can all be right or wrong things depending on what you're trying to do.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. This has been so fun. Well, I guess if you're up for it, if you have a couple more minutes, I would love to hear from you. You've been through this evolution with Wholesale in a Box, plus a whole host of other experience with starting and running things. Do you, with Wholesale in a Box specifically, now that you're kind of at this point, this particular point, what do you feel like has been a lesson that you've learned that has unlocked sort of a different level for you in business? Like, what is something, I mean, and maybe you answered that already but is there anything that you can think of that just as an entrepreneur and a business owner, that's really helped shift things for you?
I think there are 3 things. We've already talked about 2 of them. So one is the lean startup methodology. The second is making a plan and sticking to it. When you taught me to do that, our revenue doubled. Within 2 months, and then stayed that way. So that was pretty significant.
Wow.
And then the third thing I think is related to your team. You can usually hire at a much smaller scale, but much more quickly than you think. And really understanding the people that you work with in the same ways that we've been talking about understanding ourselves, and thinking about how I guess I've just learned a lot about team at this point too, and how crucial that can be, and getting out of their way has been very powerful in getting to make my days and my weeks and my months look the way I want them to for me. It's just made getting some of that locked in has meant the work is so many more times satisfying. It's just much deeper and richer. So I think we could probably do another podcast on some of the specifics around that, but it's been powerful.
For everybody listening that may have heard me say on this podcast before, Emily is the person that I've referenced when talking about having your own company and having a baby.
Oh yeah.
And I was just thinking, and you've actually been quite encouraging around the whole thing, where I think a lot of people, not from experience, but from like their perception of what it must be like, they look at you like you have 2 heads. Yeah. Like, you're building something and you're having a kid. Like that's cute. Yeah. Like, but you've really been encouraging with, like, you get to design this the way you like, you get to decide how this looks.
Yeah.
And so it made me think of this because you're talking about team. Is that sort of what pushed you into leaning on your team, or like looking at your team differently because they had to really step up in a different way?
I wanted to, but it definitely forced it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you are not scalable. No matter how many hours you work, you could work 20 or 40 or 80, but that's only 2 times. It's not 20 times or 200 times. And so I think when people have babies, it really brings that into relief because there are times when you can't be there. You maybe want or need to work less. And so you have to realize, if I am not scalable, what is scalable? And what is scalable is leadership.
Wait, what is scalable is leadership?
Well, if you can figure out a way to communicate your vision and then bring people into that vision and then have them work to create the vision, suddenly you can step out for hours or days or weeks or months at a time. And that vision can grow 10 and 20 and 200 times bigger without you needing to be the bottleneck of everything. And that's leadership to me. Yeah. So just you working more, or you keeping up your work hours, or you cutting short your time with your family only helps a teeny bit. But what helps a ton is learning to have other people that are creating what you're trying to create. I think that could be more succinctly put, but
that's totally great. Yeah, I really, there's a lot of value there. And for all you mamas out there who are attorneys running your own firm, like it is, I was just talking to another woman who owns her own accounting firm for lawyers. And we were talking about that balance, and she is a badass and she's really crushing it. And, that it doesn't have to be this or that. And I know people say that, but putting that into practice and really finding what works and finding the groove, you can absolutely continue to build a company while you have a small child. Yeah. Like it's not impossible.
No.
So anyway, and you are a shining example of that for sure.
And it can be so much fun. It's so much fun to do both.
Okay, that's so great. I wish you could see Emily's face right now. Her face just lit up when she said it's so much fun. I believe you because of what the expressions on your face.
The feeling of satisfaction that I get when I put in a day of work where I feel fully utilized and fully focused and on point and I'm managing this amazing team and growing this amazing company. And then I go and I pick up my kid and I am fully there, and we're like working on his stacking blocks and just hanging out and eating bananas. It's just the most fulfilled feeling to get to do both fully.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Would you come back?
I would definitely come back. This was a ball.
Okay, cool. That would be great. And if there's any questions out there that you want me to follow up on,
for sure. I'd be happy to answer anything.
Okay, that's so good to know. If you guys go to speakpipe.com/velocitywork, you can leave a little message there. It can be anonymous or not, and we'll be happy to follow up and see if we can have her back with some of those targeted questions or whatever. So. Great. Anyway, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, 100%. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Hi guys, it's me again. Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, and I hope you did, please subscribe so that you get real-time updates whenever we drop a new episode. If you want to continue to hang out with us, come on over to our website and check out how we work with clients. It's our signature 3-phase approach that we use with law firms to achieve growth on their own terms. Head to velocitywork.com/begin for information about those 3 phases and how you might get started if you'd like. Again, that's velocitywork.com/begin. If there's a topic you'd like covered on a future episode, or a question you have, or someone you'd love to have interviewed on the Velocity Work podcast, go to speakpipe.com/velocitywork. Leave us a voice message there. It can be anonymous or not. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to hang out with us on social, come on over to Instagram. Our handle is velocity.work. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/meetvelocitywork. Cheers, my friends, to real growth and a great life. Bye, guys. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.